Dynamics is based on the work undertaken by Claire Graves in the 1950s. Graves worked with Maurice Massey. Graves' works has been taken forward by Dr. Don Beck and Chris Cowan. Spiral dynamics builds on the research, academic research in the 1950s and 60s by US psychologist Dr. Claire Graves of Union College, New York. Graves was searching to understand human nature with questions like, why are people different? What makes people who they are? Why some people change? Why some people don't change? How does the mind respond to a world that is becoming increasingly complex? So all these questions. And Graves started looking for patterns of human development and how they relate to each other, other theories. And he spent 20 years gathering primary data from thousands of sources. So a lot of academic research went into it. The only thing was, and actually quite interesting, yesterday we sort of covered Maslow. He was originally seeking to validate his contemporary and friend, Maslow, hierarchy of needs. And it was quite fascinating. What was fascinating too is that he never actually got to finish the work in one sense. I remember listening to an audio one time. It might have been in a book I read, I don't recall. But I think in this book Don Beck was saying, I stand corrected, that Graves was really, really ill. And when he met him, and it was a push to get through the work. So I don't think he completed the work he was looking to publish, and that's probably why the dynamics isn't as broadly known as, say, other hierarchies. Because I think that, I believe that Graves had a number of heart attacks, wasn't really well, and Beck took the work on, and that's probably why we don't sort of get, it hasn't got as much traction in terms of models and so on and so forth. So Graves' work, and you get a chance to, you can sort of Google Graves' work, it's quite interesting stuff. It's known as Gravesian theory. It was taken up and developed by two of his students, Christopher Cowan and Don Beck, who coined the term spiral dynamic, which we'll go into detail. Beck, I believe, also worked with Wilber for a while, but I'm staying corrected on that. But it's certainly worth looking at Wilber's work too, but we'll talk about that another day. What's quite interesting too, by the way, the transition. Now, think for a moment the challenges that the transition that South Africa would have faced when the apartheid to multicultural democracy. Now, it's been documented that Don Beck was involved in new spiral dynamic, the South African transition from apartheid to multicultural democracy in the early 90s. And you can read that and do your research and Google it, and you'll see it's quite fascinating. According to sources, Don Beck was one of the many people who worked with many stakeholders in South Africa to ensure the transition from apartheid went as smooth as possible. Civil war was the concern. So quite a good book you can read, you get a chance to read it. And I think they made a republish this book called The Crucible, Forging South Africa's Future. It's a really, really good book. Beck's the author. I read it a long time ago. I don't know if they republished it. I think they did do a couple of years ago, but I stand corrected on that. But it's a great read. Apparently as well, Beck also had a strategy to unite South Africa for the World Cup. And Don Beck was a really, really big fan of sport, albeit he's from Texas and they don't play rugby, or at least they don't have rugby to the stature that they have in South Africa and the UK and the Southern Hemisphere. But he was a really, really into sport and sports psychology. So my understanding is, from what I've read, is that he also did some work with the team. But I stand corrected on that, it's just what I've read. So the spiral model is really, really powerful, this model. It's got 8 levels of reality, 2 tiers. Each level relates to a cultural reality, psychological reality, a cognitive reality for human beings. It's really useful, I find, in my experience, in leadership, conflict management, organisational change, communication and marketing, working with diverse communities, and cultural transformation. So it's got many uses. Really, really useful model I found over the years. And sort of going a bit deeper now, in the first tier of spiral there are 6 levels of development, beginning with the level beige, which they say corresponds to 100,000 years ago. So pretty much survival is the first level, but we'll go into more detail as we go along. The second tier is an exceptionally large jump from the first tier. You're jumping from, say, the first tier, which is beige, purple, red, blue, orange, green. We'll go into more detail shortly. Then up to yellow and turquoise. That's a big jump. Only a small proportion of the population, according to the research, actually make that jump. And I'll explain why as we go along. The second tier, different means of existence. They're yellow and turquoise. They reckon that less than 5% of people in the global population get to that second tier. Okay? And you can see here, level 1, they're the 8 tiers. And you can see here, 1 beige, 2 purple, red, blue, orange, green, yellow, turquoise. So the yellow turquoise are the second tier of the levels. So really, human intelligence is one that arises through life conditions. The environment has a big impact on how we respond to situations. So each level relates to a cultural reality, okay, a psychological reality, a cognitive reality for human beings. Now we're going to go into detail. According to Gray's work, he reckoned that there was up to 30 or 40 levels beyond. But really it's infinite levels in one respect, because as long as we're around as human beings, we're going to evolve on some level. So we'll go into that in more detail as we go along. So it's a hierarchy from 1 to 8. Like we said, there's more levels other than 8. We're just not there yet as a species. Okay? And it starts from the bottom and you go up. Each level has a colour. Okay? So 1 is beige, 2 is purple, 3 is red, 4 is blue, 5 is orange, 6 is green, 7 is yellow, 8 is turquoise. It's a biopsychosocial spiritual system in terms of ways of thinking. So it's influenced by bio, psycho, and social elements. So biological, psychological, sociological elements in the way people think and adapt to situation. Each stage was an attempt for people to create a value system they needed to be right. They needed to be accepted by others, or rejecting others accepted by themselves. Okay, so old ways of coping don't disappear. We just progress to higher levels. Each level builds on previous levels, and we can't go directly to the one we'd like without first going for the previous one. So we kind of work our way through the gears. But as you work your way through the gears, the other level doesn't disappear. Okay? So you work your way through the gears. Also, you won't jump from here to here. It's a process of evolution. And each stage, as I just mentioned before, is for people to be right, to create a value system. They need it to be right. And we have the paradigms we'll go through now. So beige happened. The beginning of beige was 100,000 years ago. That's survival-orientated beige. Okay, that's survival. Okay, food, water, procreation, warmth, protection, staying alive. Survival. Worldview, these are people living pretty much hand to mouth. Okay. Most of the people who live at beige, this day and age, are going to be from birth to 4 years of age. Okay, or say a homeless person, maybe at beige. Okay, a homeless person who doesn't have anywhere to live, whether they're in this country or in a country where it's more prominent, their survival is key. Okay, eat, water, warmth, protection. Okay. The purple meme, which is the second level of the spiral, the focus is on the tribe instead of the individual. This begins 50,000 years ago. Okay. On a micro level, this is where the toddler starts to see themselves as part of the family of the group. So what
was the age for that number 1 again? Sorry.
The beige level corresponds to birth to 4 years of age, and that begins 100,000 years ago. And from a macro level, that might be, okay, 0 to 4 year old, or someone who's just living hand to mouth, surviving, a homeless person. Yeah. Not all homeless people are there, but there are homeless people who are there. Okay, the second level, the second meme, the focus on the tribe instead of the individual. That begins 50,000 years ago. On the micro, this is where the toddler starts to see themselves as the family or the group. Okay, the separation of self, the family of the group, the tribe. Okay. For the toddlers to survive, they need to be part of the group. Okay. 50,000 years ago, if you weren't part of a tribe, you wouldn't survive. You wouldn't get very far. You'd be done by another tribe, or you'd be eaten up. So you go into a tribe. That's the second level, the spiral, and in that macro level is where the tribes start to stay in the tribe. You have an identity. Then you start having ritualistic thinking, not necessarily superstition, but ritualistic in the sense that, okay, in the beginning of cultural development, we start to make connections to things. So not necessarily superstitions, but the connections between mind and events. Okay, so the moon, the full moon means this means that. If the horse is running through the field when the sun's out, then that means this. And you start having rites of passage. Okay, the groups become more organised as constituted clans. Okay, that's the purple level. So if I do this, this will happen. Okay, so it's a biopsychosocial development. We can associate the full moon, for example, to we're going to have a good harvest. Or we're going to have whatever. Or this means this. Okay? We sacrifice for safety. That begins, and that the red level then begins 10,000 years ago. Purple breaks into the red level. An individualistic level. I want to be my own person. No part of rites to passage. Okay, warlord level is red. The strongest will survive. Where one or two people stand out, and the rest of the tribe, and they're considered leaders. Okay, the one or two who take charge of the group. So sort of raw sense of freedom. It's a bit like the teenager. I don't need your help. I can do it myself. This is a teenager enters the rebellious years. You'll see that red. Now, who needs you? Those who've got teenagers, you'll know or teach they're a different breed. So from that micro level, the teenagers, rebellious years, and from a positive note, they learn to stand up for themselves. Okay? They learn to stand up for themselves. So there are positives of having that. It's quite useful. But the issue is that you can't go around fighting. You can't go around, because eventually you're going to meet someone, and you realise that no, it was a pushover. So you've got this sort of lawless society. Okay? And you could argue that that's some of the problems we face in the modern world. Some of the problems we face in the modern world is how we manage this. I think if we manage this better, we probably wouldn't have the issues we have in society when people, if we facilitated this movement, then we probably wouldn't have some of the issues that we have in society that crop up as a result of the red level, the undercurrent red level, what happens. From the point of view, the red level is going to create a lot of problems that are going to, and the red level brought about problems that would bring about the force system. Because you think about it, you've got a society where the strongest survive, people running around, doing what they want, leaders, rebelling. Okay, it's going to create a lot of issues, one would think, to a point. Okay, and equally, think about it for a moment, and I mentioned we can compare that to these days, the rebellious level. I would always go so far to say that in society in general, you're going to have pockets of society that still operate in that way. You're going to have certain societies in various countries that operate in that way, okay, based on the environmental factors, for one reason or the other. You're still got that sort of that warlord mentality in some society. That's not to say one person better than the other, it's just, we'll go into more details going. But the red level would create its own issues, and then you had a fourth level called blue. And that begins 5,000 years ago. It corresponds. My understanding is that it corresponds to a time of religion, organised religion. It's like the example Christianity, Judaism, during that period. That's my understanding of it. And we create law and rule. Order. Red, you've got people running around and doing whatever. Think about some of the issues you're going to have. You've got people running around, doing what they want, strong to survive. So law and order created. At a micro level, this is where we learn to identify an institution, paradigm bigger than us. Okay? Less me, more we. Okay? Many societies operate at blue. Or at least have this component within there. We'll go into that as we go along. So it's more we. Civilization create armies and better ways to enforce law. Okay? An example from a work point of view, so the person might work for one organisation for 40 years or so and get the gold watch at the end of it, so to speak, but equally they may sort of get frustrated and push on to look for, well, we're going to look at Orange, which is probably more entrepreneurial, more, and we'll touch on that shortly. So the fourth system is designated blue, and that's the antidote to the mayhem of red. Okay? So the blue, authority, meaning, discipline, traditions, morality, rules, live for later. Away from that red. The red, gratification, glitz, conquest, action, impulsive, live for now. Yeah? Okay. The fourth system, which is designated blue, and the blue, one of the interesting things is, and it's also said that when the plague swept through Europe and wiped out millions of people, there was a tremendous crisis of faith. Okay? People did not feel protected because you had these plagues creating havoc through Europe, and people thought, well, actually, you know what? What they're saying is protecting us is not protecting us. Why is this happening? Okay, so that was one of the things that was influential, the Enlightenment period, which is the orange, the fifth system here. Okay, and that is materialistic, consumption, success, image, status, growth. Okay, when does that begin? The Enlightenment period begins 300 years ago or so. Okay, it's the orange fifth system. The birth of capitalism, industrial revolution, science, technology. We'll sort it out. We'll look into it. We'll create systems. Okay? We'll figure it out. It's more me-centric. The focus on the individual. You can get it if you want it. Okay? And certain societies operate more on that level too, which we'll touch on as well a little bit later in the lecture. But you can see, obviously, with that in mind, it's good. And you got positives about all, and I suppose you can say you got drawbacks for some of them too, as well. So we solve these issues and we create some new issues, and we've got other issues to solve. And from there, and from the five, from that me-centric, we got the green level. It goes to green. It's ecological. It goes back to we. Okay? So you're going from the achieve goals, the business, money, fame, to how can we give back? Community. How can we give back to the world? Okay? Let's stop this excess. Let's stop plundering the resources. Let's look to give back. Let's work with what we've got. Okay? Everyone's important. Egalitarian. Feelings. Authentic. Sharing. Let me share what we have. Let's create equal societies. Every life matters. And there's a lot of positives from green. A lot of positives from green. Save the environment. Harmony, love, joy. A mutual growth, awareness, belonging. Okay? The only thing I would say, without a good orange on the vine, you can't really have a green, because you've got to survive. You've got to produce things. Okay, and green, quite interesting. For all the great things green has brought us as well, what it's also caused too is this individual sense of importance that, okay, if we give, and we get all Greenpeace and a lot of good things that come out of it, some of the issues is, okay, well, someone's got to work to pay for this. So it's all good and well, sharing and caring and love and so on and so forth. Great, fantastic. But equally, on the other end of the scale, how do we function as a society?
Does that say 150 years
ago? Yeah, the green 100 years ago, it begins. And so you've got different movements at that point, sharing, caring, and distribution, the hierarchy of people. So there are a lot of great things that have happened there. We break down the hierarchy, every life is equal, and so on and so forth. So great things that happen there. I guess the issue is you start then promoting an individualistic narcissism too, to a point, because all of a sudden, okay, you sort of start giving people these rules as to what's right and wrong, and equally on the other end of the scale, how to have that smooth transition. So it's all good and well saying, save the trees and give this and give that, and so on and so forth. But equally in saying that, people are still using a phone. People are still, wearing leather shoes. People are still, consuming products in corporations that are, from that sort of orange level. So, unless we sort of transport ourselves somewhere off the end of the earth, then it's probably going to be difficult. I guess you could argue it's idealistic to a certain degree. Possible idealistic in the sense that it's going to breed this sort of person who starts to think, well, actually, you know what, from a contribution point of view. So as much as it centers around the we, it can start turning to the me as well as, well, I'm of value. Well, yeah, you are of value. You don't have to consider yourself valuable for any other reason other than being you. But equally, what's that growth and contribution? Science has made some great discoveries, and so has the capitalism, and presented ourselves some good opportunities at the other level. So with that in mind, we sort of, and these are the second tier levels now, which you can do some reading on, are quite really interesting stuff. And these are the levels that it's suggested that very few people get to, and Don Beck calls the yellow level the flow, the flex flow. So the natural systems, self-principles, multiple realities and knowledge. So it's not at the expense of others or the world or anybody else. Life flows naturally. The expression of individuality and sacrificing self-interest for harmony. Life flows in yellow into preservation, turquoise, and this sort of begins 50 years ago and 30 years ago, preservation, because the reality is that can we really keep going as a species in the way we are going? So we look at turquoise as collective individualism, so cosmic spirituality, the bigger picture, earth changes, holistic. So we can now see the world from that point. Okay, so from that point of view,
how long was yellow? Sorry, how long?
Yellow begins 50 years ago.
50, and turquoise was
begins 30 years ago. So we still sort of, yeah. Okay. So it's individual and collective, facilitating movement rather than the static model. So the first 6 ones are static models. Now we move into a flow. Beck calls the yellow a flow, and that flows into a turquoise. So it's role, goals. We can still have roles, goals, and teams, and we can all get together as a team and work together to help preserve our species and the world and the bigger picture, we can do that collectively. Individually, you can all bring things to the table, okay? And we can work more as a task force. And once we've achieved what we set out to achieve, we can just disband. There's no need for that sort of trial mentality. There's no need for us to create any individualism in the sense that the me-centric, we can do it in a we way. We can solve it, we can do it, we can move forward collectively, individually. Okay? And that's where, each of these stages was an attempt for people to be right. I mentioned earlier, to create a value system that needed to be right, that they needed to be accepted by others, rejecting others, or themselves. So you've got these you could class as being static levels, the first tier, and then we go into what Beck says, that sort of flow state. And you think about it, if you go back in your family tree, you think about your family tree before primate, before organism lived and procreated, the point where you are now, every organism, primate dates back family tree, assessing what was going on, adapting to the environment to avoid pain, and seeking pleasure and survival. So 100,000 years ago, we are adapting to the environment. The environment was different to what it was now, but we adapt, and the goal being to avoid pain, seek pleasure, survive. And as things change, that pretty much stays the same. The avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, survival of the species. We assess what goes on. You make an assessment. Okay. If we had a crisis, then we would look to adapt to the environment. If we had like a major crisis, then we'd look to adapt to the environment, whatever that crisis was. So, mentioned earlier, the old ways of coping don't disappear. We just progress to other levels. Each level builds on the previous level. Okay, and I mentioned earlier, we can't go directly to the one we'd like to be without going to the previous one. Okay, so it's unlikely you're going to go from here to here without going through the gears. Now, I mentioned what's quite interesting really is our communication to people, depending on where we are. It starts to reflect on where you think you might be in the hierarchy of people you communicate to, and where they might be in their perception of the world. Okay, so a teenager could be here, and we could be here. And you could tell a teenager, you get a job and settle down and this, that, and the other, but the teenager's going through this sort of rebellious phase. Okay, and they see the world the way they see the world. So, it's a useful skill to use and transfer them all across various areas, but also touch on that. So conceptually, at limitless levels, as long as we're here as a species, we can keep going. Okay, as a species, we've probably only really got to 7. Okay, as a species, we've probably only got to 7. Touching that sort of 8th, but things are progressing all the time. And I mentioned at level 8, the turquoise level, it's that global community, life force, survival on life, a fragile earth, a consciousness. Okay, if we don't sort our stuff out, we will not have a species. There's a lot of things we need to sort out. So, a lot of things are going on in the world that I'm sure you're well aware of. You see, if we do not come together, okay, we won't have. If there's a war that breaks out now, it's going to have such a big implication that there will not be the Earth as we know it. Okay, so and it's quite interesting, really, from a passive observing point of view, to just passively look at the world around you, what's going on at the moment, the fragmentation, the fragility of what's going on to a certain extent. So you can see this sort of evolutionary process. And I guess for me, it's about people who are there getting into leadership roles. Okay, Can they get into leadership roles? Can we get better collaboration? Can we get people that can see down these levels and realise, actually, you know what, if we don't collaborate and bring teams together, sophisticated teams that work for the greater good together, and form a global community, then we're all going to lose out.
We can all vote for you.
Well, then we'll go back. Then we'll go back to -10. You'll go to -7 if you vote for me. We'll go the other way. Definitely. But there we go. An average level for the human species is 4. So they say. That's the average level for species. Okay. To give you more context, in the United States, it probably, I would say, levels 4 or 5 make up about roughly 70-80% of the population. Okay. Some societies are more inclined to be one level or the other. In my opinion, I think the UK is more level 4 than level 5. I think America's more level 5. That's my opinion. I probably get slagged off now by someone on social media, but my point of view is that the UK is more here than here, and America's more here than here. And I make that sort of assumption, and I stand corrected, and I could be wrong, on the basis of the way society runs over here, in my experience of working here for considerable time, and also my experience of spending time in the USA too. I think that the USA is probably a little bit more entrepreneurial, get up and go, let's do it type attitude to a point, where I think we've sort of still got sort of social class. And you only got to look at things like, okay, when they tried to bring out that Obamacare, of course, obviously, politically, there are reasons people weren't keen on it because they're paying for private healthcare anyway, but long and short of it is, it was objected. Where equally here, we still have a strong, or at least at this point, whatever people say about NHS, is still a great system. So the state still has an influence in that respect. And I think that's changing here. I think governments have sort of, in this country over the years, have had an impact on that. And certainly I think that, you know, whilst, for sure, the developed nations pretty much run at 4 or 5. I think some run more at 5 than 4, and some a little bit more at 4 than 5, so to speak. But you could argue that the Western world pretty much is 6.5 to 1, and each individual is different accordingly. It's gonna be in and around there. Okay, does that work for people? Yeah. Okay. Level 6, they reckon, comes out about 10% and is growing fast. We are seeing more and more people, aren't we? Really, albeit they don't get much media, but we are seeing more people who are pushing beyond that. Okay, they're seeing the world differently. That we are seeing more and more people pushing that sort of level 6 that we talked about before. So in the US, I suppose, beyond the 70-80% that are here, and the 10% that have gone to 6, you're probably going to get most people that say free beyond that. And most of them are going to be teenagers. Okay? If they're older and they're free, they're probably going to be gang members. Okay? If someone in their 40s is at free, it's probably more than likely going to be a gang member, you would think, if they're still running around and, you know, come on, let's have a type thing, an underwarlord type character. They're probably going to be a gang member, at least in my opinion, from that point of view. Albeit in sport, you could have that too, because sport brings out, in the sporting environment, that context brings out that as well. Because you see sports people like going to big rage in the sporting event, but you see them off the field in a different character, so to speak. Level 2, same again, mostly children, but you're going to get some adults there as well too. Okay. Level 1s, I would say generally represented by infants, or someone who's sort of seriously, serially homeless, that's just completely obsolete in the sense that they're purely living on the street and have done, pure survival mode. And you can think of countries around the world where you're going to have that sort of level 1 as well, or huge pockets of a lot more than what we've got in Western society, and 2 as well. Okay. In spiral dynamic, the numbers have been replaced with colours for this reason, and the reason being to remove prejudice about higher and lower, better or worse. That doesn't say we're better than the society that runs here, or worse. We just are where we are. Okay? It's not a conscious choice completely. You don't consciously choose completely what level you are. I don't wake up tomorrow morning and say, I want to be an 8. Experience is going to take me there, if it ever does take me there, or any of us there. Our environment will form a big factor in that. Okay? So in certain countries, 2 or 3 are far more imminent than 4 and 5. Okay? Less developed countries. Think about some countries around the world. I don't want to offend anybody, and I certainly won't offend anybody. And I'm sure if people think otherwise, that's fine. But I can think of some countries that are at 2 or 3. The countries that are less developed, and that's not saying we're any better than them or worse than them. But what we do have is probably more opportunity than them. Okay, that's why people want to come to this country. There's more opportunity. Okay, if you're in a country where there's a lot of war and famine, you want to leave. Now, politically, I don't want into a debate as to why that's caused and what goes on. That's for another day. But what I would say is that that's why you've got people who are willing to risk life and limb to come to more developed countries, because there's more opportunity. That's undeniable. From a point of view of surviving, having a career, living life. That's a given. Okay? If you live in somewhere like, say, Rwanda, it's a generalisation, because not everyone in Rwanda is going to be, struggling for survival, but collectively, you're probably going to have less chance for opportunity to get schooling, education, have your needs met, have a career path, mortality ratio for the baby mortality. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm not saying we're better than them, and we probably wouldn't survive there, of the means to do that based on what we experience. But what I am saying is that certain countries will operate there, and that's not exclusively around. I'm just plucking that out of the sky. There's a number of countries as well around the world that, through chance, coincidence, are where they are. The cocktail, the perfect storm. It could be war, it could be political, it could be many, many factors.
Do you think that is maybe, let's say, communities, let's say, that say live in the Amazon that have not been affected by the rest of the world? Do you think that kind of community would, by this, what I'm understanding, they're in beige still, or around about beige?
Yeah.
But do you think they could possibly, we don't know, maybe not chat to them, do you think they could possibly still be in yellow or beige? Is that like a spanner in the works of this system, or is it something that can be?
Just so I understand the question correctly, Jay, just sort of.
So let's say this, because this is all part of like society and the growth and things like
yes.
that. And obviously there's no hierarchy system. But let's say if he was explaining to someone that maybe in their head they would be thinking, to go through all these things, there is a hierarchy system, because that's what natural
yes.
humans are going to do. If you was living in very a basic situation where you maybe don't have you don't have to
yes.
feel like you need to attain the physical and attain this and all that.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah, do you think that having that, being in that, what is the basic?
Well, the environment will influence our response. So, maybe let's just say the film Castaway, where from a human need point of view, the priority is when the plane crashes and he's on this uninhabited island, is survival. So immediately he's here, surviving, whatever means necessary to survive. Equally, we see people who come from countries who are 2 or 3 flourish. Actually, in my opinion, I think people who come from countries from here to our society probably do better in some instances than people who grow into society, because they see what we don't see. They sort of, from the outside looking in, think, you know what? And that's why I think, in my opinion, a lot of people who come from abroad in countries that are less developed are very successful. Contrary to what the media says, the reality is a lot of them do well and do that really, really well. A lot of them go beyond what our population does, who are born and brought up in that environment, because they see the opportunity for growth and blending in. I don't know if I've answered your question correctly. I think that you might have said...
Is it was it necessary to, like, for them to have that growth to achieve that, the yellow and the beige? I mean, is it almost possible for them, for the people that are in beige, to have that?
You mean they don't have to have the material?
Yeah, they don't have to go through all
they
these,
could have the flow of life by living in a beige environment.
That flow of life, that environmental togetherness, the appreciation, all that kind of stuff.
And okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean these are influential moments throughout time and influenced each meme to a point, and we've adapted to that. But I take your point. I see what you mean in a society where they don't.
Almost like your opinion more than it.
So in a society where they don't have the industrialisation, but equally what they would have in that society would be the means for stability. So in that society, okay, do you have lawlessness? Do you have tribe? Do you have just pure survival? So whether they're achieving it in the same way we would achieve it, does that sort of make sense? Yeah. Okay. So in that society, do you have people running around, being lawless? In that society, you have people just bonding on one tribe and bonding to the tribe. But equally, from a micro level, the infant's born, and then the infant has to bond to a tribe, or it won't survive. Then, after it bonds to a tribe, it starts to question the tribe. Who are you to tell me? And then it goes to that sort of teenage rebellious phase. Then, this is a micro level. It's okay. From a micro level, then it goes to blue. It starts to realise the teenager, I can't keep rebelling. We've all been at that sort of rebellious phase to a point, but from teenage point of view. But then you go to blue and you kind of conform. You go to, uni, maybe find a job, but then you might want a bit more and think, 40 years in the same job for a gold watch and the pension is probably not what I want. I want an entrepreneur and go out there and try things, have a go of things. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah, and then you've got all that materialism and you're great, you've got all that money and whatever else that comes with it. Fantastic. You think, well, is it really just about me? It's about we. And you start giving back, and you see people who do start to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The whole thing just keeps on phoning for more questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we're sort of scratching the surface. You could probably do a course over 3 weeks of it all. And I do encourage you to go away and do some reading, because it is a very, very powerful model. But I do take your point. And I think it's a really good point. So developed countries generally run at 4 or 5. And when we say developed countries, it's not necessarily just materially developed. It's not necessarily developed in the sense that we think, okay, but we've got the opportunity to get stability, to have work, to feed our family, to eat, to sleep, to function, to progress, to learn, to grow. Without that, you really can't get to there, because you need stability. The last thing on your mind, if you're here, you're concerned about eating, about surviving. Okay, at this point here, does that sort of clarify? So if you're here, your business is basically eating hand to mouth, survive. Okay, if you're here, you've got the stability necessary to know you've got a job to go to, know you've got food to eat, know you've got a roof over your head, to know you can sort of progress, and then maybe punch through there, set up a business. Okay. So it's not individual intelligence, it's cultural development. Okay? That's not to say a 4 or 5 is superior to a 2 or 3, because they're not. Though a 4 or 5 has more opportunities. Take a moment to think. Would you prefer to be at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? Would you prefer to be in an environment where you've got lawlessness, people running around, warlords, strong to survive? Well, you might do if you're the strongest, but you've only been the strongest for so long. You'd probably prefer to be in an environment that, you've got protection. Protection for the vulnerable, protection for all of us that need protection. You know, you want a society where you can walk the street. You've got an element of protection, of safety, and also the opportunity to flourish and set up your business and make a mark on the world. Okay, is that okay with that? So from the point of view of life, the relation to life, so level 1, the child is born survival. Level 2, tribal bonding. Because the baby knows at a certain point there's a separation of self. The baby is no longer an entity with the mum. The baby believes it's one with the mum at a certain point, but then the baby realises that actually not, I'm not. It's almost like a shock to the system. Okay? To a point for the baby, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, we are separate here. So what do I do? Once I know I'm separate, what do you do, Jake? If you know you're separate, if you've got this protector, and then you know you're separate to the protector, you're divine, what do you think the first thing you'll do?
So I was thinking was literally
that's why. So if you've got someone protecting you, you believe you're one with, survival, and then you realise that this person is not, it's a separation of you. You're not one entity. You're separate. What do you think the first thing you'll do? Survive.
You then going to go off, I guess.
You'll look for a tribe, a family to survive. You're going to look, this is my best chance to survive. Inherently, years ago, we were in tribes. To the point that if you didn't become a member of the tribe, you probably wouldn't survive long. That's why I think inherently we have this sort of tribal mentality even now, because we've inherited that to a point now. Because you think about it, we form, our little tribes. You see it in society. You see it at macro and micro levels, in schools, in various societies. Because if you're not in the tribe and you're rejected from the tribe, you probably wouldn't survive back then. We still got the mentality now. So the expression of individuality when you're in the tribe is more about actually conformity. You've got that group around you, and you're afraid of being ostracised, because you know if they kick you out of the tribe, at that point, well, I can't feed myself. I don't know what to do. Where to begin? So we don't have the same challenges we had back then primarily, but we've got different challenges. We've still got that fear of being ostracised. So generally speaking, people just generally conform to that point. But then what happens to the child in the tribe? It starts to question, well, who the hell are you? I'll show you. I'll do it. And we see the rebellion phase beyond the tribe. We're going to go out there and experiment, explore. I'm my own entity. I don't need you to feed me. I'll get my own stuff, and so on and so forth. And that, we mentioned, will take so long before you realise, actually, you know what, I can't do it on my own. So you might have a teenager who tells you how the world should be or how you should run your house. Well, the door's there. And they go out the door, I'll show you, and they decide, I'm going to grab a loaf of bread, the teenager, I'm going to get my loaf of bread, I'm going to get a rucksack together, and I'm going to make it on my own. You'll see. Then they go out there and realise, well, actually, you know what, I think I'll come back inside. As you do, well, actually, you know what, maybe rules, systems. Maybe, a university, get a job, and that might be the way. And then, from there, that might not be enough. You apply for a job, you've got, a so-called job for life, and you wake up and want to think, goodness me, is that all it is? You start getting this sort of itch for more, and you want more, entrepreneurial, and so on and so forth. Then you sort of get all you want. You've got this sort of wonderful life, you've got the sports car, you've got the house, you've got the money, and you start to think, well, maybe it's not just about me. I want to share this with people. It's not just about, it's about sort of giving to a point, and that's sort of your Greenpeace type thing, and, okay, all for one, and let's for all, and so on and so forth, and that sort of gives you a bit of, in a nutshell. So just to surmise, just to surmise, so you've got the beige, for the first being purple, second being red, blue, orange, green, yellow. And here you've got a bit of a summary. Cultural manifestations and displays and thinking. Okay, so beige, survival, instinctive. Purple, animalistic, that tribe, that kin spirit. Metallic, red, that sort of power god, egocentric, gratification, conquest, action, impulse, live for now. Blue, that truth, force, authority, meaning, discipline, traditions, morality, rules, live for later, save for rainy day, pension. Orange, strive, drive, strategic, materialism, consumerism, success, image, status, growth. Green, a human bond, consensus, egalitarian, feelings, authentic, sharing, caring, community. Let's give you a bit of an overview, and obviously then we get to the second tier, yellow and turquoise, where things become more of a flow, more of a natural system, ecological, blending into holistic. So I guess the benefit is, I think, and of the many benefits, what's quite useful is knowing where you are on that scale, but knowing where other people might be. And that can be quite useful in the way we communicate with people, solve problems with people, leadership as well. So remember we said earlier about you still got the capacity. You never lose that. And in certain situations and circumstances, we may fluctuate in levels. Okay, we may fluctuate and have to adapt and be more aware and understand. So what I'd like you to do is take a moment now and think about it. We can't relate to a level we don't understand. So there will be people watching this, and you guys listening to this, and we're all at different parts of our journey, and they're going to struggle to understand a level they've not been through. And just like sometimes I mentioned earlier, I listen to people like Wilbur speak, and I just, because he's sort of, God knows what level he's at the moment, I'm like, wow. I may have that epiphany in that moment, but equally, from a big picture point of view, you kind of have your own growth. So I wanted to take a moment to think about it, and just take a moment to think where you are in the model, you know, just and think about your own life in general, how things have unravelled, and some of your own set of life circumstances that have happened. Just take a moment to think of where you are, and perhaps you can think of people that you work with, where they might be. People you want to work with, your own family, members, societies, different countries, culturally. Okay, which one?
Would you be more than one, or do you have to just be?
Well, at this moment in time. At this moment in time, and maybe at different moments in time in your own life, you know, where you were, if you can sort of reflect on that, think about your own progression throughout your own life, from being born to where you are now, as far back as you can think of. Think of where you might have been. You might have travelled, lived somewhere else. You might have had another job, different career, made a lifestyle change. And what all your collective experiences have taken you to where you are today. And biologically, psychologically, sociologically, all has an impact on who you are. So think about it this way, okay? Let's think about it this way. We know biology has an impact on behaviour. How much it has an impact on behaviour is anybody's guess. But we know biology, genetic, has an impact on, say, on physiology, skin colour, hair colour, eye colour, genetic. So equally in the brain, we'd be naive to think it doesn't have that. Okay, but let's say we're all born with different genetic makeup, and that has an impact on our behaviour. But equally, all things said and done, so does when we're born, the people around us. these psychological influences that we have around us. And who are they really? The biggest psychological influence that we have?
Mum and dad.
Yeah, if you've got a mum and dad, and siblings, carers, whatever it is that you've got. But if you've got a mum and dad, you've got a stable background, and you sort of, all things being well, okay, and you grow, you have these needs being met, survival, you go to a nice tribe, they love you, they care for you, this one little tribe you've got, they water you, they feed you, they nurture you, they get up in the night and cuddle you and soothe you. It's okay, little baby, go back to sleep, and so on and so forth. And in your rebellious years, they support you, they see the error of your ways, and they nurture you, and they bring you to opportunities and look after you and take you to groups and affiliation and sort of introduce you to some of this in a delicate way, and you've got people to talk to and so on and so forth. And you can make this sort of smooth transition. You're in a privileged environment, and dad's a big entrepreneur, mum's a big entrepreneur, or mum or dad is a very senior authority, like a school principal somewhere, and you know, or possibly a university lecturer somewhere, and you've got that, and you've got those role models around you, and you sort of go through the gears, and you thought, I want to do what mum did or dad did, be a lecturer, or be a teacher, and then you think, well, actually, I'll be an entrepreneur, I'll do a bit of both, and then you sort of get to a point where you realise, you know what, you've got these parents who have evolved themselves to that point, and they're sort of giving, and they're part of a movement to help, but they're still here too. They get the blame. We see people who do both, entrepreneurs who get really wealthy and give back and do what they can to give back for whatever reason, and you're sort of growing up, okay, all good and well, but equally on the other end of the scale, what if at this age you had the local gangster, I can't have a baby, the gangster thinks, and I'm going to take you. But you don't grow in that environment now. That hypothesis is different. Now you grow up in a different family. In the family you grow up in, you just see violence. You see some bad things around you. You don't get soothed in the morning. Shut up and stop crying. You don't get fed and watered. And maybe as a result you might go into a home and get moved to 100 different places. Okay? And then you're given some education, you're given some insight into the world. But what do you think your priority is going to be? You would think so. So the person you'd be is going to be different than the person you would be. So the environment has a big impact. That's not to say that eventually you think, you know what, sod this, I'm going to take, you know, the bull by the horns and go for it. We know people who, and I've got friends who've come from countries who the system is here, and they excel and flourish in sport. I made some great friends who go on to do well. Let's say you can't do it in this environment. If you haven't dealt the cards, of course you can. But given the choice, would you prefer to stay with the first family who love you, serve you? Would you not say statistically you've got a better chance of doing well in life? You've got all that. All the literature points towards that, but equally we know that that's not always the case. But some people who've got everything handed to them don't go on and actualise. But statistically you would think that people give you two scenarios, which one would you take? From a psychological point of view, you'd be a different person, you would think, than the person you were. So psychology has a big impact on our behaviour and the people we are, and social circumstances. Your peer group. We've only scratched the surface. We've only scratched the surface. But I do think it's well worth it to whet your appetite to go away and do some research and reading in conflict management, in organisational change, in communication and marketing, work with diverse communities, cultural transformation. Just take a moment to think some of the ways that the model can impact that and where you are on the model. Okay. So I'll